Hey, hey, what's up? Thank you guys for joining us tonight. I'm here with my partner in crime for live streaming,
Uh,
Jordan. And tonight we're back doing live streams. It's been a minute, right?
yeah,
Because the last time we streamed was for Shadow Lord, which was a few months ago, which that series was awesome. And unfortunately, we did not get to cover those last two episodes, but
no, I
that was
know
a
the
crazy
timing didn't work.
finale.
And then
Um,
I wish we got to Fernando and Grogu too, because then that came out after.
Yes. Um, but speaking of Mando and Grogu, that for some reason was not even the most exciting thing that's coming out for Star Wars this year, for me at least, because tonight
Sure.
we're talking about the brand new Star Wars anime series coming to Disney Plus on August 5th. So just in a less than a week, I guess,
Yeah.
the Ninth Jedi. So this is going to be a follow up or a continuation of the two Ninth Jedi shorts that had come out as part of the Star Wars Visions umbrella. And I don't know. To me, this is, I did enjoy the Mando and Grogu for what it was,
Yeah.
but to me, this was something that was super exciting because this combination of Star Wars and anime was something that for a long time I never really thought would ever happen. And then Visions came out in 2021, and then we got a season 2 and a season 3, and now we're getting a whole spin-off of what's probably my favorite episode
I
from
agree.
Visions so far. Like of all and honestly, it's one of my favorite like new Star Wars things that have ever
Yeah.
been around recently. So super super excited that we're getting this as a full series. But before we start kind of talking about some of our theories about what we're going to expect and things like that, I wanted to kind of dial it back and talk a little bit about Star Wars Visions just as a property, because again, it's it's really interesting that we're having Star Wars and anime coming together like this. Um, so let me switch over to some of the pictures I got here. Okay, yeah. So Star Wars Visions. It's been out. We've had 3 seasons of it so far, right? Season 1 was 2021, and it was all Japanese anime studios kind of doing anthology episodes, one studio per episode kind of thing. And then we had season 2, which was not just Japanese anime studios, but animation studios from across the world. That didn't grab me as much just because I
Yeah.
am an anime fan. But then we had season 3, which kind of brought it back to just being anime, which came out last year. And of course, that's where we had the Ninth Jedi follow up. But to kind of set the scene a little bit, I wanted to ask you, Jordan, before we got started, because I know anime isn't your wheelhouse of expertise necessarily. So I kind of wanted to know kind of what your exposure is to anime kind of leading up to this. Because obviously, I know we're both big
Yeah.
Star Wars fans, but anime, that's something that the two of us haven't totally like linked up with all the time. So I'm kind of curious, what your thoughts are just on it as a medium in particular.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not as knowledgeable, and you kind of put me onto it, more than anyone, which is cool. But I think, let's see, I've seen a couple of like the Studio Ghibli movies, which I did really like some of those. And then obviously, I think the first one that we actually watched was Cowboy Bebop,
Yep.
the whole show, which that I absolutely loved. Between the music, I'm a big jazz guy, and Bebop, and yeah, and I mean that of course was probably the most similar to like a Star Wars type of show, with just the it being in space, and those characters, the kinds of ships and all that, different
And
planets.
of course the bounty
Um,
hunters, right?
Bounty Hunt. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? So, and I mean, I guess quick plug. I mean, I liked it enough to record a cover of the theme song "Tank" from Cowboy Bebop with my band, the Front Yardigans, a few years back. So that was kind of a fun project that we did. And like I said, I'm a big jazz fan. I played the saxophone, so got my friends together, and we're like, you know what, we could probably record this, and we kind of recreated the intro in a sense, with us playing the instruments, which was fun. So yeah, so I think that, I've always loved animated, either movies or shows. I've always loved like Pixar, and just all forms of, whether it's 3D animation, 2D animation. I'm a big, like even Tom and Jerry fan from back in the day, Pink Panther. So I think from an animation point, it's anime is such like a creative form of animation. And it's cool to see like all different studios, versions of it and their takes on what it could look like. So that I think was one of the coolest things with Star Wars Visions, especially season one. Where it was all the Japanese studios, just seeing the different interpretations of what some of these lightsabers, for example, and armor, and what certain notable Star Wars visual things could look like in anime. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I will link your tank cover
Sweet.
in the description of this live stream when it's over, because it is awesome, and so is the video. But yeah, I mean,
Thanks.
I know you've watched a couple of Ghibli films too, and that was kind
Yep.
of my introduction into anime. When I was younger, I had watched a couple of those, but it's really cool that the night or Star Wars Visions kind of came out when it did, because that was also right around the time that I was really getting into anime and really taking it seriously.
Right.
And of course, I've been a big Star Wars fan my whole life, so it was cool that right when I was also really getting into anime, Star Wars kind of burst onto the scene with their own,
Crossover.
anime thing. So it was really cool. And I am a huge Star Wars Visions fan. I've got my Ninth Jedi T-shirt on today, and I've got my where are they? Right there, Am and Kare figures from the twins from season 1 too. So I am really excited about that. But I mean, what do you think is the unique factor that, what can anime offer to Star Wars that you really can't get out of other things? Like, obviously Star Wars does have several animated projects, lots
Sure.
of animated projects. Some of the most important Star Wars stories are animated, right? Of course, the Clone Wars show, Star Wars Rebels, which was becoming increasingly important in the canon, and increasingly looked back at very fondly by a lot of people. So obviously we've had Star Wars animation, but what do you think makes anime so compelling to be kind of with Star Wars?
Yeah. I mean, one thought that I was just thinking, that, like, overall, like, international reach,
Mm-hmm.
compared to, maybe some other shows that are, strictly in English, or, that kind of stuff. But, anime is something that is just so popular throughout the whole globe that, it's just that much easier. I mean, of course, Star Wars is insanely popular, regardless internationally. But this just draws in even more fans that, even for you, who was like getting into anime at the time, now it's just something that you already like, and combining the two. So I think, Star Wars, it already, between live action and the animated shows, is something that's always been like pretty visually stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say that most people say that about anime. So I think it was just kind of the perfect blend of, what they could do in animation, for something like Star Wars.
Agreed. And the Ninth Jedi in particular, that first episode that came out with Volume 1 in back in 2021, that stood out to both of us at the time as just
Yeah.
being like really special. Like, all of them were cool, right? There wasn't a single one that I really didn't like. But the Ninth Jedi just felt different. It felt like there was a bigger world there to explore,
Yep.
and I can't say the same for all those episodes. I
Mhm.
mean, it would have been cool if we got more of all of them, but there was something about the Ninth Jedi in particular that was really cool to me.
Yeah,
And
I think the story was just so mature,
mhm,
like just the writing of it, and it kind of fit, very, it was very much its own thing, but it, to me, fit the best within the world of Star Wars that we already know, and some of the themes, that we typically see in Star Wars. So I think that was one thing that really stood out to me.
that's really good foreshadowing, because at the end of the episode, I do want to talk about if we think like how the Ninth Jedi could does it fit
Yeah.
into Star Wars canon and some of those discussions. So, and I know that is a big hot button topic. You know, obviously Visions is marketed as sort of a non-canon or, you know, alternate universe type of project,
Sure.
but there are a lot of stories within Visions, including the Ninth Jedi. In fact, especially the Ninth Jedi to me, that, you know, feel like it could easily kind of slot into canon. And one last thing I'll bug you about before we move on. I just wanted to know, other than the Ninth Jedi, what were like some of your other favorite Visions episodes so far?
Sure. I definitely know season one the most. So I remember the duel was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I didn't get to watch I know they did like a sequel episode to that one as well in season three, which I do need to watch that still. I really like, I forget what it was called, but it was like the one with the band, you know, in season one. I think even like Boba Fett was in it
Yes.
and Jabba or something.
I can't
Um,
remember the name of it right now, but I
yeah.
know what you're talking about. Yeah,
But as a
that was good.
musician myself, and you know, I know we maybe even talked about this a little bit on the Mall podcast at one point. You know, we kind of made our own characters that could fit within the Star Wars canon, and my character is a cluhorn player, so that was kind of cool to see like a take on, you know, a band, you know, forming in the galaxy.
And
I also
it wasn't even like the typical Star Wars cantina music band. It was like a punk
right,
rock band as
yeah, which,
well,
and I know you love punk rock, so
which
that was
was
probably pretty
really
cool
cool to
too.
me. And the
Yeah.
soundtrack of that one stands out to me, you know, a lot. So,
Yep. I also, yeah, I remember the twins was obviously great. The Elder I remember was also pretty cool. I think that one had David Harbour was voicing, I think the Elder, or one, or maybe not, or maybe the other character in that. But and the Village Bride was also great.
yeah, I love The Village Bride. I
Yeah.
wish we did get a sequel to that in volume 3, which I did like that episode a lot. Not as much as the original, but that one
Hmm.
was excellent. For me, it's probably Ninth Jedi at the top. So I'm really happy that out of all of them, this is the one that's getting its own series.
Yeah.
Village Bride was great, and I think the twins too is awesome. But the
Yep.
one from Volume 3 too that I really like, I think is called Bounty Hunters. I don't know why
Mm.
that one's really cool too. But the Night Jedi uh, is kind of interesting because not only is it a collaboration or a crossover between Star Wars and anime that we've already talked about, but the people behind the Ninth Jedi are also interconnected with a lot of stuff that I like and that a lot of viewers of this channel would probably like too, because it is being directed by Kenji Kamiyama. Of course, anyone who watches this channel will probably know his name as the director of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. And the animation studio that's making the Ninth Jedi is Production IG, who of course has done a lot of Ghost in the Shell properties, among a bunch of other really amazing anime projects over the years. The other director here is Shunsuke Tada, who I'm not as familiar with, and then produced by Hitoshi Ito, who I have heard many times in the anime space. So an absolutely stacked lineup of people here behind the Ninth Jedi. So there's tons of crossovers happening. We've got Star Wars, we've got just anime, we've got Ghost in the Shell, Production IG, awesome animation studio. So, I mean, even if you don't really care about Star Wars, if you are an anime fan or someone who does like these directors and Production IG, this is something to really look out for, I think. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people who maybe even aren't huge Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
And Kamiyama has had an absolutely insane run because he's also directing the new Gundam series coming out next year, Gundam XARX-ZERO. So same guy, Ghost in the Shell, Gundam, Star Wars. That's like everything I talk about on this channel. This guy is tied into all of that. So very, very cool. But yeah, so the Ninth Jedi, you know, has already kind of had two pilot episodes of sorts. We had the
Yeah.
original episode back in 2021 with Visions Volume 1, and then we had the second, I guess, episode here, The Ninth Jedi Child of Hope, which came out last year with Volume 3. And now, of course, we're getting the entire series. which is really exciting. And the 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 series, I think, is 8 episodes. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's 8 episodes. So I guess in total, we're technically getting 10 episodes of The Ninth Jedi, maybe more if the show does well and, it continues into more seasons depending on how things end. But I also wanted to include this. This is a little throwback from my trip to Star Wars Celebration last year, which was in Japan, and they had an entire anime expo or anime and manga pavilion expo area inside Celebration, which is like, of course, if you're doing a Star Wars convention in Japan, having a whole anime or manga section would make sense. And they even had a live action kind of costume mock-up of Kara's, outfit from the first episode, from the pilot episode, which is really cool. I really wish, I have a couple of pieces of merch from the Ninth Jedi and from Visions in general, but I really wish that they would make more, physical merch, even sabers. Can you imagine like Kara's saber at Galaxy's Edge or something? That would be crazy.
I love the Margrave Juro's hilt.
Yes. So we're actually going to kind of go over a couple of little nuggets that I'm going to credit the YouTube channel Star Wars Explained, because he had uploaded a video where he had done an interview or been part of an interview with kind of the directors and the producer of The Ninth Jedi, where we get a little bit more kind of interesting nuggets about the show that I don't think you've heard these before. So I'm really curious to see some of your thoughts on some of this. Of course, the big thing in The Ninth Jedi is the fact that the lightsabers change colors depending on who's holding the same saber, right? So, someone can be holding one person, I could be holding a saber and it's, blue. And then I give you the exact same saber and it's, green or purple or red or whatever.
Right.
And then you hand it back to me and it's blue again. Or if I turn to the dark side, it goes red, or it can go back to blue if I am redeemed to the light side. So, of course, that's not something that's really, something that's established in the Star Wars canon. But that is a very, central core concept or idea that the Ninth Jedi plays with. And I think it's a really fascinating one. Like, some people may be a little upset that it kind of breaks canon or doesn't really make sense. But I think that that's one of like the coolest new ideas that a Star Wars project has done in a long time.
Yeah, and I think it kind of shows like a direct connection to the Force, with the, the lightsaber's user, that based on, your mood or your feelings, the color kind of reflects the, either maybe even, your fighting style with a saber or just your views. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And one of the things that is brought up in the interview is that this concept that Kamiyama had of, lightsabers changing colors based on the kind of moral alignment and emotions of the user actually came from a complete misconception he had when he watched A New Hope for the first time. Because he thought that that's how all lightsabers worked, like in the original Star Wars movies. And one of the examples he gives is like, when in Empire Strikes Back, when, Han Solo uses Luke's saber to, open up the Tauntaun, so they can survive the snowstorm. He's thinking like it's going to be a different color, or like if Vader had grabbed his saber back, from Luke, it would become red. So it actually came from a misconception that he had watching Star Wars originally. And now it's turned into an entire kind of major narrative idea in his own Star Wars world, which is really cool to me. And the way that lightsabers change colors now is obviously not that. We do see plenty of examples of lightsabers changing colors in canon, where, the most notable one is, where the Sith bleed the kyber crystals of the Jedi. And so they go from like, blue or green to a red, to red. And that's part of their sort of rite of passage to become Sith. And we see it happening in real time in the Acolyte show.
Sure.
Not a big fan of that show, but this scene was cool. And it was the first time we had really seen something like that kind of being depicted on screen in real time. So I figured I'd mention it. One of the other points that they talk about in this interview is they feel that in Kamiyama's vision for the Ninth Jedi, there's a bit of a difference between like Jedi and Sith than we normally expect. The Ninth Jedi takes place in like a time period far, far, far in the future where all ideas of Jedi and Sith are kind of not there anymore. And his concept of light side and dark side and Jedi and Sith that we're going to see is a lot different, because he sort of views the Jedi Order as kind of restrictive for the Jedi. Like it kind of forces them to always do the right thing, which to the Jedi can feel kind of suffocating. But sometimes, and as we've seen this play out many times in the Star Wars saga, in order to do the right thing, the Jedi have to do slightly ambiguous things that maybe are not morally aligned with the Jedi Order's ideas. Or
gotta bend the rules a little bit.
You gotta bend the rules a little bit. So, he said that the core of the Ninth Jedi series is not about, order or rule or who's right or who's wrong in that sense, like the organizations themselves of like, the Sith Order or the Jedi Order, but it's more about, who is kind of spiritually worthy or, deserving of the title of a Jedi or a Sith, not necessarily following, a commandment list or something, which I think is really, really interesting. Kind of take, but it's just funny because that feels like the entire lesson of the prequel trilogy in a way.
Yeah.
Just like, don't always follow what the Jedi Order tells you to do or the Jedi Council, because it's not always right. So we're going to kind of be exploring that in this show, which is really cool. Another thing they mentioned, which I had to do a lot more research on this segment, more than I had to do on the Star Wars lore, but again, the time period of the Ninth Jedi is supposed to be much further after the Jedi and Sith and the concepts of, the Empire and the Republic. All of that's kind of faded away for a long time. Yeah. So Kamiyama said that the Ninth Jedi is actually really connected very closely to Japanese history, specifically the Sengoku period of Japanese history. I have a picture from that time. Which lasted from the 1400s to 1600. And this was a period in Japanese history where it was kind of lawless, and there was a lot of chaos, civil war, social upheaval, big changes going on, on the island. And there was no real central authority. So there was, in Star Wars terms, there was no galactic empire or republic kind of holding everything together. And instead it was a bunch of sort of little city-states or daimyos or, people vying for power in these kind of smaller regions. And that he said that that's sort of the world building that he's bringing to, the landscape of what the Star Wars galaxy looks like at the time, at the time period of the Ninth Jedi. And I think personally, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That they're tying this to Japanese history as well.
History.
Yeah. And the other thing, of course, we have to mention is, this seems like a new thing, which it is, but we got to remember too that like Star Wars as a whole, George Lucas, even back in 1977, had borrowed so much from Japanese history and culture, just even in the original trilogy. So Star Wars and Japan, Japan has been baked into the DNA of Star Wars for a long time. And it's cool that we're kind of seeing it come out in a big way, with an actual anime series that is also really reflective of Japanese history. I just think that all these years later, almost 49 years ago now, Star Wars has been around for that long, and we're getting a story like this. Yeah, literally the 50th anniversary is next year, because that's Celebration LA, next year, where they're celebrating the 50th anniversary, which
Yeah.
is absolutely nuts to me.
Wow.
Um, and one other thing that he had brought up in the interview that I wanted to discuss, because one of the interviewers had asked if Disney or Lucasfilm had sort of had him change any major things about what he wanted to do in the Ninth Jedi, because one of the really cool things about Visions is that it doesn't have to fit into the box of kind of existing canon. So they're given a lot more creative freedom to talk, to create the stories they want to create. But someone had asked, what are there any changes that have been made, since your original conception? And the one thing he really brought up was just that Lucasfilm really liked the Jedi Hunters as a faction. They just, I don't know, they thought they looked cool, or it was a cool idea. So they asked him to incorporate them more into the story, which I guess they maybe weren't going to be as big of a deal in the full series as they were like in the pilot episodes. But it sounds like we're going to be getting some more Jedi Hunter stuff.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too. I think they look cool.
I was like a bounty hunter kind of. Yeah, the design is pretty awesome.
But you're right. They're kind of like bounty hunter, renegade, not really Sith aligned. They're kind of their own faction, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it's cool that they're kind of being, they're playing a bigger role. Now, as much as people talk about how the really great thing about the Ninth Jedi is, of course, the visuals and the cool playing of the ideas with lightsabers. To me personally, one of the coolest aspects of the Ninth Jedi, one of the most compelling things about it, are the characters, I think.
Yeah.
And we've only had 2 episodes with them. That's not a lot of time, but I have always really been drawn to the characters, the character design, the character personalities, these people who feel very, like they fit right into, an anime show, but they also feel like they fit right into the world of Star Wars.
I mean, they were just all pretty memorable.
Yeah. And there's a article that's been published on StarWars.com. I will also link it in the description of the stream once it's over. That kind of goes through, we get a little bit of tidbits of certain characters that we haven't known about yet that kind of popped up in the trailer. So I want to go over some of those quickly. Of course, the main character, Cara, who has become one of my favorite Star Wars characters from like the new Disney, timeline to me. I just think she's super cool. And I'm really, I don't know. I fell in love with her character even from, the first pilot episode, and, continuing into the Child of Hope, which to me, I don't know about you, Jordan, but I felt like Child of Hope was kind of it felt like a side quest a little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't feel, cause we leave off the end of the first episode thinking that they're about to go out and do, find these, Jedi and rebuild the order, and they're about to get started with that. And then the Child of Hope kind of brings us back to a more kind of intimate story of just kind of Cara and this droid that she meets. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a little more of like a character driven, episode, which was still great. We got a lot of great character moments in it, but you could argue in a way it kind of leaves, ends off of kind of where it started. The episode, which it's still, now is going to set it up great for the actual series, but I'd agree with you there.
And of course the other big character that kind of shapes a lot of the story is her father, Lajima, who is one of the last sabersmiths left in the galaxy. And he's really one of the only people alive that still knows how to make lightsabers. And he's the one that's making these very specific lightsabers that kind of, change colors.
Yeah.
And one thing that they do reveal in the article was they say, once a Jedi Knight, renowned for his combat ability, he makes a new home on the remote planet of High Islan with his daughter. So I don't know if we actually knew that before, if Jima was a Jedi Knight or, just someone who made sabers. So it looks like this is confirmation that he actually was a Jedi at some point. Which is interesting because they the way they built it up was they were talking about how the Jedi Order was long gone. Well,
Sure.
it can't be too long gone because
Yeah.
he's still alive and he was a Jedi at one point. And this shot here is from the trailer where it looks like actually kind of a younger Lajima. So I'm thinking this actually might be like a flashback scene of him
That'll
like
be
training
awesome.
as a Jedi, which will be cool to see. The other character that we know is appearing is Ethan, who was one of the, I would say maybe a deuteragonist from episode 1. We haven't really gotten a whole lot of personality out of him, I think.
Yeah.
In the episodes, he was barely in episode 2 or the Child of Hope episode, like barely. So he's still kind of a mystery to me. I don't really know much about, I can't really comment much on him, to be honest. And the name
Yeah, I guess the
Ethan
biggest thing.
No, go ahead.
Or go ahead. I was gonna say the biggest thing was, I guess in that first episode, the fact that he was the only one that the lightsaber didn't turn red.
Yes, that's
He
right.
was kind of just supposed to be seen as the actual the only Jedi there. But I do hope we get a little bit more of him.
So we do know that he is at least a good guy at heart,
Yes.
which we can't say the same for all those other Jedi that showed up. Which is kind of what brings him along, kind of launches him into the journey with Cara to rebuild the Jedi Order. But I am interested to see more about him. I think his name is a little bit funny because we've got all these other wacky names that are either very Star Warsy or very Japanese names. And then we just have Ethan. he's just here. But I am curious to see kind of more about him in the series. And then we also we can't talk about the Ninth Jedi without talking about one of my favorite droids, 49s, 9999. I love this guy. This, of course, is Kara's droid companion. Every Star Wars protagonist needs a droid sidekick. We got
Agreed.
R2D2. We've got K2SO with Andor, and of course BD1 with Cal Kestis. So it's cool that they're following in that lineage and having Cara, have her own little droid companion. And, say what you want about Visions overall, but I think one thing that almost every episode from all volumes has nailed is droid design to me.
I agree with that.
Some of them are much more similar to just regular astromechs and things like that. But then we have a design like 49s, which is just completely different than what we've seen. He kind of floats around and has arms. And I don't know. I just love, I like droid designs. I'm a droid guy in Star Wars. Like I love me some droids. So 49s is one of my favorite, and I'm glad that he's showing up in a big way, or going to be as well. We also have, of course, Margrave Juro, who's the GOAT, I think. I think he's the GOAT.
I think his character is awesome.
He's so badass. So badass. And
he pulls in Odysseus in the first episode.
Wait a minute.
The disguise.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. He's literally bro, I think he's Odysseus. I think we cracked it. I never thought about it that way, and now I'm never going to not think about it that way. He is Matt Damon. He is. I mean, he kind of look. I mean, he could even play. Matt Damon could play, like, if he had the Odysseus look from the Nolan movie, he could pull off a live action Juro, I think.
Yeah, man, I would love to get Matt Damon in Star Wars. That'd be sick.
Yeah. He shows. I did have a picture saved of him with like his mask and the hood on from the episode 1 or the pilot episode. I don't know where it is, but Margrave Juro was such a cool character. And I'm hoping to get more out of him. But one of the things that they mentioned in the interview too, that I forgot to say earlier, was that it's all going to be kind of a battle between different people's sense of justice. So instead of, it's like, this is the Jedi's sense of justice, this is the Sith's sense of justice, it's going to be more like, this is Margrave Juro's sense of justice versus Cara, who kind of has to find what her own sense of justice is. versus General Nawam, who's one of the villains we'll get to. So it's
Mhm.
going to be more of a personal, alignment of how that is, which I think is also reflective of the way that the lightsabers work too, which is really cool. The Homan, not the droid, the alien guy, Homan, who was also in the pilot episode. And I think he was in Child of Hope very briefly.
Yes. Yep.
But he's a kind of an alien guy. We still don't know much about him either. Other than,
Yeah, I guess
go ahead.
yeah, I guess I was gonna say, yeah, the most interesting thing with him was that, during that duel in the first episode, he was the only one whose lightsaber color changed, and it changed to purple, which was cool. And I think even Juro kind of told him, like, it in your heart that this isn't you, and he mentions that the other ones kind of influenced him to kind of have a dark side view. But it's always kind of been like, whether it's real canon or not, that a purple lightsaber kind of signifies a blend between light side and dark side in terms of maybe just your views, politics, that kind of stuff. So I think that was a cool visual thing in this, where like literally with the color change, they actually did have it change to purple when he was kind of in that more conflicting, view of where he should be or what side he should take.
Yeah, like the obvious, okay, we got red, we got blue, let's make purple, and that's kind of in the middle.
Yep.
I mean, that is obvious, and of course the biggest, when we think of a purple saber, who do we think of?
Of course, Mace Windu.
Of course, Mace Windu, right? Who had very much, especially in Legends, but in Canon too, to an extent, was always known to actually tap into the dark side of the Force,
right?
Using, through his, him being a Jedi, like the lightsaber form that he practices. And I think this isn't canon anymore, but it was called like Vapad, I think, which was deliberately like using anger and aggression, but kind of through a Jedi lens. So maybe Homan is also kind of along that lineage of like Mace Windu. I completely didn't see this earlier, so I want to apologize, but I want to shout out Danny Sullivan 12345 in the chat. He's been kind of commenting on our on some of our words as we go. So I want to say thank you for being here. Let me see what he said. He said, "You guys sold me on this. I got to check it out." Well, there you go.
That's our goal.
Yeah, and he admits that he is kind of more of a casual fan of Star Wars. So, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to do with this stream and some of the videos I've been making, because I know a lot of people are anime fans, but don't always watch my Star Wars content. So this is my way of kind of bridging those two worlds to try to get, anime people kind of excited about this too, because I think this is going to be a really cool series. But let's move on to a new character who did not appear in any previous episodes, and his name is Dunbai. I think that's how you pronounce it, Dunbai. But I'll just read the description straight from the article. The leader of Makoma Ko, Dunbai is a former Jedi Knight who left behind his Force training and chose to protect his people through politics and commerce instead. He once operated as a merchant in the Outer Rim before assuming leadership of the Free City State. So, another former Jedi Knight who's no longer a Jedi Knight, i.e. like Lajima. And as far as this Makoma Ko, as far as I know, I'm not a total Star Wars like master geographer, but I'm pretty sure that's a new place. I've never heard of it before. And if I had to guess, it might be this place from the trailer that we see very briefly. I don't have any evidence to support that, other than this is one of the only new locations that could be like a city that we see. And this place does look cool. I mean, I mentioned this in my review of the trailer, or the breakdown of the trailer, but it kind of is a mix of like Naboo plus kind of, the buildings in the background actually remind me a lot of the Ghibli movie, Kiki's Delivery Service, which is based off of kind of like, it has kind of a Northern European city vibe to it. When I look at those buildings in the background. That's what that reminds me of. So it's kind of a Ghibli-ified Naboo, which is actually kind of awesome to me. But I wonder how much this location is actually going to appear in the anime. But then we have... Now we'll get to some of the villains now, if that's all right. We've got the main, who I presume is the main villain. His name is General Nawam. And I will read the description again real quick. General Nawam is a helmeted figure fully clad in black. He's amassing a fleet to bring his idea of order to the chaos of the galaxy, which includes the extermination of the Jedi. Yeah. Shockingly, however, Nawam's lightsaber burns the bright blue of a Jedi's blade, not the red of the Sith. Which was one of the first things I noticed when I saw the trailer and they revealed this guy as the bad guy. It's like, well, in the Ninth Jedi world, if you're actually a bad guy, people will know because you've got a red lightsaber.
Right.
And if you're a good guy, you have a blue saber. So he still has a blue saber, even when he's trying to exterminate all the Jedi. We'll have to see how that plays out. But of course...
Yeah, I wonder if there's some sort of way that we'll find out, where they could kind of almost fake out the lightsaber into, the color staying at blue or something else, just to not come off as, a villain. And, in terms of trust, like you said, it seems like in this, version, this world of Star Wars, it's pretty obvious based on the color of the lightsaber if you're good or bad. So, so who knows if he's mastered some sort of ability, to almost manually change his color.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I also wonder too if maybe, again, going back to kind of Kamiyama's words that he said about this being more of a personal story about, being pure of heart or whatever, maybe the idea or the motif they're trying to drive home with this guy is, maybe deep down he actually has good intentions.
Sure.
Maybe he has a very, benevolent worldview, and in his mind, he wants the Jedi to be gone. Kind of like Luke Skywalker in the Ninth Jedi, or in the Last Jedi, excuse me.
Yeah.
Because, that was kind of his idea, right? He was like, the Jedi need to be done. Of course, he kind of backtracks on that. We won't get into all the sequel trilogy drama, but, that was kind of his angle too, right? Was I'm still a good person. I'm still a Jedi, but in my worldview, in order to create a better galaxy, the Jedi actually have to go extinct or to be eliminated. Now, Luke didn't go out and create a massive weapon to destroy everything. This guy is doing that. So he is a little bit more proactive in that philosophy than Luke was. But I still think it's interesting to make that comparison. But we see in the trailer, like him and Kara duking it out. She's got the green, he's got the blue. Technically, he's the bad guy. I don't know. Of course, his armor is kind of giving Vader, Kylo Ren vibes, right? But I think it's a unique enough kind of twist on the design to work to me.
Getting 2 Agamemnons this year in terms of aura farming.
This could be the next aura farmer. I think so. We've got Zero and Odysseus, right? And then we've got Nawam and Agamemnon. That's awesome. Okay. We've talked about them already, but we've got the Jedi Hunter faction, who, again, according to Kamiyama, are going to play a much bigger role in the series than kind of initially conceptualized. And they just look cool. I mean, they all kind of have this gas mask-esque kind of look to them. They're in both pilot episodes. They wear slightly different armor in each episode, but they kind of generally have the same look. But it sounds like to me that, I thought that the Jedi Hunters were like working directly, like were part of General Nawam's army or his, his forces. Like instead of stormtroopers, he had these guys. But it sounds like they're kind of their own group that's sort of just working with General Nawam, which is cool. We also have one of the head Jedi hunters named Anda, who's the guy on the left, I believe. And this is a still from The Child of Hope, the second episode. And I don't think we actually knew his name in the Child of Hope initially. Yeah. So it sounds like he's coming back possibly. And the last guy I want to talk about, who we did not know anything about until this article, was the other, or really the only, red lightsaber wielding character, which is this guy named Geno, I think is how you pronounce it. And I'll read his description quickly too. A Sith who pursues the Jedi on Nawam's orders. Geno's face is almost completely obscured by a metal mask. The arrogant warrior, formidable in the Force, is utterly confident in his dark side abilities. He commands a colossal ship that dwarfs any vessel that oppose him. So he is a Sith, confirmed, if that wasn't obvious by the red lightsaber. Yeah. Again, there's really no subtlety you can do with that in this series because the color reveals all, even if the character is hiding something. And I was curious if this was just maybe like a lead Jedi hunter who happened to have a saber that was using it, or if this was an actual Force user. But it sounds like he is a Force user. And this is a wild theory, but to me, I think Geno might be connected to Lajima in some way. Like they used to know each other. Maybe they both were Jedi at one point, and Geno fell to the dark side or something. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like the two of these guys are connected. But that lightsaber design looks pretty sweet, I have to say.
Yeah, pretty cool, that hilt there.
Yeah. And the ship they're referring to has to be this absolute behemoth from
they weren't kidding.
The trailer. And I mentioned in my review video, or my trailer breakdown, that I thought that this looked like a giant evil white base ship from Gundam, which I know you're not as familiar with that, but it does look like, just looks like they took the main good guy ship from Gundam and like blew it up 100 times the size and then made it all black. That's what this looks like. And I love that. Certainly not the typical design when you think of, bad guy ship designs in Star Wars. You think of Imperial Star Destroyers, big giant triangular ships. This isn't that. It's different. But I still think it does kind of fit within the Star Wars visual language for the most part, in my opinion. And I don't know if those two giant circles on the ship are supposed to be actual like mini Death Star lasers or what those are exactly. So we've talked about some of the concepts of the Ninth Jedi. We've talked about some of the characters we're going to see, some of our expectations. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about, of course, is the big question. Is the Ninth Jedi canon? Can it be canon? Should it be canon? Of course, after The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, Star Wars has really not touched the time period after Episode 9. But that's changing soon, very soon, because, of course, we have Sean Levy's Star Wars Starfighter coming out next year with Ryan Gosling and Amy Adams and a bunch of people. I also saw this revealed in real time at Celebration Japan last year, so that was really cool. But this will be Star Wars' first like real big foray into the post Episode 9 world. And there's also kind of whispers, I don't know what's going on with this, but of course we have that Rey New Jedi Order movie that may or may not still be happening at some point. But these are like two projects that have been announced or are coming or might come in the future that are dealing with kind of this time period. And this is the same time period that the Ninth Jedi is allegedly taking place. So that kind of begs the question. I'm really curious to know your thoughts, Jordan. Like, after everything we know about the Ninth Jedi so far, like, do you think it can be canon or should be canon, or does it have a seat at the table?
Sure. I mean, I think it's certainly possible. I think in terms of the story itself, I mean, I still think it could fit in, and I mean, I really like it, so that's part of why I'd almost want it to be, canon in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But it in a way too could be a little limiting for anything that comes out leading up to this, in that, it would all have to lead up to this point. But I guess you could argue, of course, the original movies came out and then they backtracked and did, the prequels, which they knew how to then lead it into the original trilogy. So it's like, if this is received really well and people really like the story enough to the point where, they think that it could work, they could then kind of build back from, some of the movies they do, and maybe kind of lead up to this, which would be pretty cool. I think it'll be hard for maybe, for them to actually plan it all out that way. And as we know, it's like, they'll mention things that are coming out and then they get canned, or, this director's going to do this and that. So I think it'll be something that they would really have to plan out well in advance. And I don't know if they'd be able to do that, but I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. That would be the best case scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, again, the Star Wars Visions umbrella was created deliberately to be a big sandbox, to give these directors from other studios that aren't as necessarily connected to Disney free reign to kind of tell the kind of stories they want to tell without worrying about, you can't say this, you can't do this,
Right.
because it has to fit within canon. Now, some of those directors have gone crazy and done stuff that would never be canon at all, no way possible. But then others have created stories that, again, are so compelling and so cool that it's like, can we just fit this in? Can we just fit this in somewhere? Because I love the
Sure.
Ninth Jedi so much, and I think, like I said, it deserves a seat at the table with some of the other big stories. Now, the big elephant in the room is how would it be canon, regardless of the technology or the time period that it states itself to be in. Of course, with the color changing sabers, that's of course not really a thing in canon right now.
Sure.
So how can we reconcile that? I want to hear your thoughts, and then I'll share mine.
Yeah, I mean, one possible thought that, I mean, this is a little out there, but, could be cool in that, I mean, technically, I guess it wouldn't actually be real in the canon, but almost where it's like a story told within Star Wars. Like, for example, I mean, I know we brought it up now a couple times, but like the Odyssey, for example, I mean, look at how many different interpretations there are of that, from the original,
Different
Homer,
translations and
story,
stuff.
and translations, and it gets passed down over time. So of course it's supposed to, set like it's in the future, but what if it's like these storytellers within the actual Star Wars canon, write some sort of a story based off of, the real Jedi and Sith, and, their interpretation of what a future could look like in Star Wars. So that could be just a cool way where it's like, yes, maybe it didn't actually happen within that universe, but where it's still like the story itself is still canon to Star Wars. So I feel like that could be interesting.
I never thought of it that way. Um, and of course, Star Wars itself is told from like a storybook in a way, because right, they started
Yeah,
off with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So, in I'm gonna drop. This is some really deep, deep, deep Star Wars George Lucas stuff, but technically, the whole saga of Star Wars, everything we know about Star Wars, the books, the movies, the comics, the animated shows, all of the time periods, the Old Republic, everything is written and documented by a group called the Wills.
Hmm.
And the Star Wars story is told in the Journal of the Wills, and that's WHILLS. It's the group technically that can't think of his name right now. The guy that's in Rogue One, the blind guy.
Oh, yes.
That's like his religious group is like part of that group that documents stuff, I
That's
think.
right.
Gosh, I can't remember his
I'm
name,
blanking too. Of
but we know, you know what I'm talking about.
course.
So like this would be an additional layer to that type of thinking, where it's like it's a story within the story of Star Wars that's being told.
Yeah. And
And
didn't we even get in the Ahsoka series from Hu Yang? Didn't he reference that and actually, said the line,
yes,
like from like the start of the book? So that was pretty
exactly.
cool too.
Which did freak a lot of people out because they're like, they can't say that. Like that's stupid. Like Disney did it again. It's like, actually, that is kind of
Canon.
how it is. Like I think one of the first drafts of the original Star Wars script by George Lucas was called like Journal of the Wills, the
Hmm.
story of Luke Starkiller or something like that. Like
Right.
that was like it was a very long title that would not have sold any movie tickets. But from that we did get, it's still that idea that Star Wars is like a story that's told, that already happened, that's been
Hmm.
recorded and passed down, is already kind of baked in. So having visions somehow folded into that too in that way would be cool to me. Um, but for a hardliner Ninth Jedi defender like I am, um, the mental gymnastics that I'm doing in my own head to justify it is like, one of the things I thought about was maybe, and I mentioned this in my trailer breakdown too, but what if this, Lajima's sabersmithing is sort of like a lost technique of building lightsabers that was sort of lost to time for a while.
Hmm.
So it's like always existed, but it's kind of been this extremely, it's gone extinct basically.
Right.
And somehow Lajima kind of brings it back, like, many, many, many years after episode 9, somehow this way of building lightsabers kind of comes back in vogue. And that's like the new way of building sabers, where it changes colors depending on who's using it, is actually a really old technique that's kind of been brought back.
Hmm. I like that.
That does probably not going to hold any water when the episode comes out, but I don't know. That's something I thought about, and it's a big galaxy out there. I also want to throw that out. Like we've seen crazier things happen in Star Wars. We got
Sure.
freaking Night Sisters and the Peridia, right?
Yeah.
From a different galaxy. All of the technology and the all of that was kind of explored in Ahsoka. So there's a very big galaxy out there, a lot of possibilities, and I'm very selfishly hoping that the Ninth Jedi can be canonized to some degree. But I also recognize, and I hope this goes without saying for everybody, but like a story doesn't have to be canon to be enjoyable, right?
Of course.
Obviously. I've really loved all of Visions, most of Visions. Again, Volume 2 wasn't really my thing, but I've loved all of Visions, knowing full well that it's not canon technically or officially, but still having an absolute blast with it. And also being a big Gundam fan, I know that feeling too well too, because there's so many cool little side stories that are like awesome, and then they're not even canon to the main, Gundam Universal Century timeline. So a story doesn't have to be canon to be cool, but it would be even cooler if it was, is all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
Um, but with that, we're going to start wrapping it up tonight. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been tuning in. And before we go, Jordan, I want to ask your final kind of expectations, final thoughts about this show.
Yeah, I mean, and it's cool too because I remember even when we first watched the episode in season 1 of Visions, like we kind of both said after watching that one, like if they're gonna make a series, on one of these episodes, this is the one to do it
Agreed.
for. So it's kind of crazy that now it's actually happening. So I mean, I forget if we really actually discussed like what that series could be then, other than just that they should do it. But I expect that this will just be a great continuation of kind of where they left it off from those first 2 episodes. Like you said, the characters are all really likable, and from the looks of the trailer, even some of these new villains look pretty cool. Some of the locations. So I think just kind of building this world within the Ninth Jedi universe will be pretty awesome to see.
Agreed. Yeah, this is a long time in the making. I mean, I'm a Ninth Jedi. I'm a Ninth Jedi super fan. I'm gonna admit that it is still to this day, that first episode is one of my favorite Star Wars things, period, that's ever come out. It just really captured my imagination, really fascinated me. I think about that episode every week. I love the Ninth Jedi. And again, out of all the shows, or out of all the spin-offs we could have gotten from all these different really, really amazing Visions episodes, the fact that the Ninth Jedi is the one that was selected is really special. The trailer looked great. The team behind it looks awesome. Of course, Kenji Kamiyama returning to direct the whole series. Big fan of his. He knows what he's doing. Production IG knows what they're doing. I hope so far Lucasfilm has known what they're doing for the most part when it comes to Visions and doing, anime. So I think we're in for a really big treat here with the Ninth Jedi show.
For sure.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Again, thanks everyone so much for tuning in. This episode will be available in audio format on Spotify as well. So I'll leave a link down to description if you want to check this episode out on the go. But Jordan, thanks so much again for joining me here tonight talking about Visions. It's always great to have you on. I always love talking about Star Wars stuff. So I really appreciate it. But once again, thank you all for tuning in. And I'll see you all next time.
See ya.